Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and today we have reached a full month of the war in Ukraine. We are on day 31, and we're going to cover the past 24 hours of the war right here tonight. There have been some major developments today, which has led to the title that we've gotten tonight, which seems extreme at the moment, but if you bear with me until the end of the news tonight, when we get to the international news, you'll see that there is a decent amount of credibility to that question, and that is also why there is now a blue line on the map. We'll get to that later tonight, though, and discuss that in more detail, but moving on from that, we're going to get to the schedule. Of course, we'll be covering the fronts from front to front as usual. We'll cover the northern front, which actually only has one event in it today, which is kind of weird. We will then move on to the eastern front, and we will cover all the news there. Then we will move on to the southern front and cover the news in the southern front. We'll move on to the rest of the country, and then the international news that appears to be incredibly interesting and very, I would say, historical. I guess that's the best way I can say that, honestly, because what was said today appears to be showing that there's something going on in the background that the public has not been made aware of yet. I'd also like to say that we'll not be taking questions tonight in between each segment. I may stop to take 2 or 3, but it's not going to be the usual question segments like we've done before, where it's a large amount of them. They'll be an incredibly small number, if there are any, but I'll decide that as we're going through and see if people want to just keep watching the news or listening to it, or if they want a couple of the questions answered. Because there are some good questions that should be answered at the moment sometimes, but we'll just have to wait and see as it goes. So, without further ado, we're going to get straight on to the news of the Northern Front. Right now, if this is surprising, we have gotten no news in the Kyiv area. This is the first time in the entire war that we have not gotten anything from the Kyiv area at all. We don't know about the counterattack over here. We don't know about the counterattacks that the Ukrainians have achieved around the Irpin floodplain, and we don't have any information about what's happening on the eastern side of the city near Brovary and Troshenya. We just don't know. There's been no information today, and that's suggesting to me one thing, and this will make sense once I go over the rest of the news, so everyone just bear with me. But this is giving me the idea that the Ukrainians have been met with a large amount of success today, and they are being very careful about what they're publishing. And the Russians have had terrible defeats today in this area, and so they have gone completely silent in terms of news or videos from the Kyiv area. We'll have to wait in the coming days to see if this is true, but at the moment, this appears to be what is the case. So we're now going to move on to the only bit of news we've gotten in the Northern Front all together today, which is a massive protest happening in this town called Slavutich. So I'll show you all this real quick. It is a huge protest, and as normal, the Russians are trying their usual crowd dispersion techniques, but it appears that it didn't stop this protest at all. As you can see, the gunfire didn't stop the crowd, it only enraged them. I don't think Russian riot control is based in any sort of science, because it appears that what they just did has done the opposite effect of dispersing this crowd or making them more subdued. It appears that it's made them openly more hostile, so that wasn't a smart move on the Russians' part, but I'm going to let the video continue. We're going to see what the aftermath of this is. And you see now the crowd's getting a little riled. And rightfully so. And so I'm going to cut that video off there because of course it ended, but we can see that not only is it a common occurrence in the southern area of the country like we've seen in Melitopol, Berdyansk, and Kherson, where large protests have been held nearly daily, it is a major ordeal for the Russians to deal with everywhere across the entire country. The problem is that we don't get a lot of videos of it. I'm not really sure why. I'm not sure if the internet is sketchy in areas that are now Russian controlled, but nonetheless, it is good to see that the Ukrainian spirit has not been broken, even in the areas that have been captured or taken over by the Russians, and they still go out and fervently protest against the Russian actions inside of their city every single day. And I'm very happy to see that the Ukrainian spirit is not broken, and the great thing is that the entire world stands with them. We'll get to that later today, because it appears that maybe some of the phone calls that our viewers may have placed may have had a bit of a sway on Western countries and their line of thinking. Although that's a bit of a bold assumption to make, it appears that they started to go in the direction I was speaking about some days ago. Now, to move on to the area of Chernihiv, we've once again, much like every other day, have heard not a lot of news, or any news at all, of course, today, on any sort of events occurring around Chernihiv. This suggests that there has been a lull in the combat. We don't have any information to show that the Russians are attacking the city actively, or if the Ukrainians are involved in any firefights or enduring any kind of barrages of any sort. So at the moment, the Chernihiv area has remained static. If there is any information to show otherwise tomorrow, that today was a different story, it's just that the videos weren't able to make it out, we will update that in tomorrow's stream. But as of the moment, nothing has happened in this area. And I do have to revisit once again that while the Russian army is incredibly impressive in size, some 730,000 soldiers, along with thousands of aircraft, tens of thousands of tanks, and so on. The problem is that while they have all these grand numbers on paper, their logistical abilities are handicapping their actual force strength and what they're able to do with it. Because while they have 730,000 guys, they only have 4,000 logistics vehicles, vehicles that can carry supplies and such. And so we did the math a while ago, and we're about to get to a location unknown video that will show you all that Russian supply lines are having major issues. But we did some math weeks ago and figured out that with the amount of supply trucks they entered the war with, and if none of those were destroyed and every single one of them was in running condition, they can only supply 62% of the current invasion force they have inside of Ukraine. And that's using the entire logistical network of the Russian army and ripping it up out of the entire country of Russia and moving it to Ukraine to just support this small invasion force. So logistically and reasonably, the Russians really can't add any more forces to this invasion. They pretty much maxed it out as far as what they're able to do, and have gone way over it in terms of the amount of supplies. Because you can send more guys in there, sure, but the thing is that the more guys you send, the more supplies are needed, and the more supplies are needed, the more strain there is on their already collapsed supply chains, and then those soldiers just end up starving, running out of gas, and they just sit there along with everyone else in absolute misery, and they don't accomplish anything rather than becoming a target. So that being said, we've actually covered the entire northern front in 10 minutes, which is wild that it's only taken that much to do the whole entire northern front. It's never been like that on any day. So we'll see what's happening up here and why the reason for the lack of news was today. But we're now going to move on to the eastern front, where we've had a decent amount of location unknowns, and we're just going to go through them piece by piece and see what we can get out of these videos. So the first one we can see is that there have been some Belarusians that have joined the Ukrainian side. This is an interview with one of these volunteers, and I'm just going to let y'all see it.
Путин, ты хуйло знай, и весь твой русский мир погибнет вместе с тобой. Чеченцев не видел, конечно, но пахнет вот этими писюнами по стенам, которые разлетелись. Пойдемте покажу.
Серед білорусів сьогодні є поранені?
Нет, в Беларуси все целое.
Оце захоплена теж техніка, правильно?
Это захопленная техника, это подорванная техника. Смотрим. Но ключевое, есть много трофеев.
Ага.
И это не только раз и два. Еще стоит вон там танк.
Скажіть, будь ласка, ви не боялися штурмувати? Я так розумію, що ви штурмували з одним танком і двома БМП. А у ворога тут було просто, я бачу тут дохіра танків, БМП і багато чого. І от ви все одно змогли вірватися і захопити це все.
А чего нам бояться? Мы боремся за правду. Мы свободные люди, поэтому нам нечего бояться. Поэтому, как видно, победа за нами.
Скажіть, якщо зустрінете білорусів чи росіян, ну росіян, розумію, ви вже зустріли, а якщо зустрінете білорусів, от яке ваше ставлення? То що білоруси зараз начебто воюють за Російську Федерацію.
Будем тоже убивать. Много было видео, много было сказанного о том, чтобы они не шли на это, но если пойдут, значит будем встречать, как и все.
Скажіть, будь ласка, серед українських військових добровольців розмови є про те, що полонених не беруть. Ви теж не будете брати в полон білорусів? Чи у вас є все-таки якісь сентименти до них?
Я думаю, будем смотреть по ситуации, но скорее всего будем брать пленных.
Oh, bicycle. I was wondering about these a while ago, and I just saw that, and it immediately clicked in my head. I was wondering why no one was donating bicycles to the Ukrainians, because while that sounds silly, think about it. If you donate bicycles, they can create bicycle battalions. And while a bicycle is kind of like a goofy thing, it's not something that's been devoid in war situations. In World War II, bicycle battalions, well, bicycle-based units were actually incredibly common because it takes much less energy to move a bike over a longer distance over a faster amount of time than it does walking, you know, if they're lacking vehicles. And so it's good to see that apparently a Ukrainian has apparently gotten himself a civilian bike. But I hope, and I wonder, well, I really don't hope, I wonder if the Ukrainians are in need of trying to make their TDFs more mobile for some reason, and if so, would anyone be interested, you know, an organization be interested in donating bikes to them? Because I feel like that would be nothing other than beneficial to the Ukrainian cause, because it would allow their much less mobile units to become that much more mobile, just due to the bikes being able to travel faster over greater distances and use up less energy than walking or running would. So I'm going to continue the video.
Вот. Хотелось бы спросить, почему они это делают и за кого они это делают. Вот. Поэтому будем смотреть по обстоятельствам.
Я би на місці білорусів здавався в полон білорусам, тому що українські добровольці і збройні сили, от за моїми спостереженнями, давно вже в полон нікого не беруть.
And so that's the end of the video and the interview. I'm not entirely sure what they were saying, but it was very interesting to see the damage they had inflicted on the Russian vehicles behind them, as well as the bicycle. And also the guy has one hell of a mustache, just getting to the qualitative observations of this interview. This guy looks like, what was the guy's name? Charles Bronson? You know, that English prisoner who like fought all the prison guards and had to get him moved around to several hundred prisons. He kind of looks like the actor who played Charles Bronson in the movies. And, you know, that's really off track, but nonetheless, I think he looks a lot like that. It's very interesting to me, but we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see more video evidence on the ground of the hypersonic Kinsel missile hitting its target. I'm going to show you all this. This is very interesting. And also I'm going to pause it, full screen it, unmute it, and then show it from the start. I'm not really sure where the missile came in. Once again, it was supposedly going around Mach 10 to Mach 12, so that's incredibly fast. Probably a little bit too fast for a camera to pick it up from a distance, unlike the normal cruise missiles we see that are going like 400, 500 miles an hour. But nonetheless, here's the video. So you can see that the explosion was somewhat small, really compared to the average cruise missile explosion. But it does appear that it didn't really have any lead up to it. It just happened. Like no one could really prepare for that to be an occurrence, because the missile was flying, of course, around Mach 10 or Mach 12, and most cruise missiles don't reach that kind of speed. So we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we see a Ukrainian tank on the move with something exploding behind it. But I'm going to let y'all see this video real quick. As you see back there, an explosion happened, and this also appears to be a T-64BV, and the tank just kept on rolling. I'm not exactly sure where this is, of course, that's why it's a location unknown, but it does look like the Ukrainians may have made some ground, perhaps, in this village, considering that it looks like it has been destroyed, and they were kind of standing out in the open, so maybe the Russians have had to fall back and they're regrouping, and meanwhile the Ukrainians are kind of taking a light break in the town while small skirmishes still occur on the outskirts. But that's nothing but assumptions, and I don't really want to make all of my reporting on assumptions. All I could see in that video was that there was an explosion in the background and the tank was moving on. And so we're now going to go on to the next bit of news, where we can see proof of a TOS-1 being used on Ukrainian locations, locations of Ukrainian forces. So I'm going to let y'all see that real quick. The explosions will occur in the bottom right side of the screen, as you can see right down there. It's sickening to know that the Russians just commit war crimes so blatantly, and this appears that it may have been taken by a Russian spotter drone, and it's sickening. But nonetheless, I think even the leaders in the West have gotten tired of this sickening conduct, because if y'all wait until the end of the video, because I'm trying to keep to the normal format instead of jumping around, and you wait for the international news segment, you're going to see that there have been some major developments today that suggest that there have been some things happening behind the scenes that we haven't really been told about that may be leading Western governments to prepare for war. But I'm going to get to that later. We're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see a Russian helicopter hit by an ATGM. It appears that it was it landed on the ground. I'm not sure if it was damaged to the point that it had crash landed in this field or not, but it does appear to be in an odd location. But from what we can see in this video, it was hit by some kind of AT weapon. Also, what's interesting is that you can see the path the AT projectile took through the helicopter, because it left like a line of debris out the other side once it hit. I think this helicopter, honestly, although we don't have enough evidence to back this up, was abandoned and it crash landed. So either the Ukrainians were destroying it to ensure the Russians couldn't try and repair it and make it airworthy enough to fly to some kind of repair facility, or the Russians were destroying it themselves to make sure that the Ukrainians couldn't do the same. Nonetheless, you can see the little streak of the AT rocket once it went out the other side. But nonetheless, it appears that that helicopter has probably been disabled and won't be used by either side from that point on. We're now going to move on to the next bit of location on news, where we can see that Ukrainian artillery is in action. I'm going to show you all this real quick.
Утренній бум антирозвіплятор. То да. Ранок починається не з кави. Добрим утром, кацапи, блядь. Ранок починається не з кави в артилерійських.
Москалику, ми не спимо, блядь. Ловіться цяночки, прийдуть до вас зараз.
Ловіть огурчики.
Одна цяночка пішла, блядь, і даруночки вам роздавати, блядь. Ловіть цяночку.
Гармата! Постріл!
And you can tell this artillery crew loves their job. It sounded like everyone here, including especially the guy behind the camera, is just enjoying hammering away at Russian positions for sure. Because this guy, like, just listen to his voice, it's just sapping with, like, emotion. I'll rewind it a little bit more.
Ловіться цяночки, прийдуть до вас зараз.
I mean, I don't even have to speak Ukrainian to know that that guy's just having one hell of a time with doing this. So anyways, we're going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see the Ukrainians destroy a Mista S SPG that the Russians commonly show off in their Victory Day parades. I love to point that out because I don't really know how many of these they have, but they've lost so many of them, at least on video. I'm starting to wonder if they'll have the same presence at this year's Victory Day parade, which keeps on drawing closer and closer each day as we go on. By the way, for no one who knows, every year the Russians hold a Victory Day parade on May 9th to celebrate the end of World War II and the defeat of the Germans during that war. And these are one of the main showcase pieces of armor that they use during the armor section of the parade. But nonetheless, I'm going to show you all the video. So you can see there, you can see the outline of the Mista S SPG. It appears that this drone is just hovering above it. Maybe it's another civilian drone that they're using, but nonetheless, it'll drop some kind of explosive on the top of the SPG and completely destroy it. As you can see, the explosive has fallen onto the tank. It then exploded, and that tank has been knocked out of action, most likely along with the crew. Now it appears that the SPG is having some kind of ammo cook-off, which is very interesting. But nonetheless, another Russian armored vehicle that has been wiped out. Interesting stuff to see. And so we're going to move on to the next video, We can see that another Russian tank was destroyed. In this video, it appears that it was destroyed by the 25th Airborne Brigade, but nonetheless, this is the video. You can see the tank sitting here in a dug-in position. I'm not really sure if this is one of the defensive positions that we saw dug in near Bucha, Irpin, and Hostomel, but nonetheless, it is a dug-in tank in a hold down. We see that the Atgm appears to hit it from the bottom left side of the screen, right under the turret. It exploded. And that tank has most likely been disabled, considering that that entered the crew compartment for sure, and also the ammo carousel that's on the bottom of most Russian tanks' turrets. Very interesting stuff to see. It's always good to know that the Ukrainians are holding their ground, and the Russians aren't gaining anything or losing anything without taking decent losses. Of course, from the casualty reports, they're taking serious losses across the board, so it's not really like I can't confirm whether the losses are high or not, because I believe the Russians have also confirmed that they have lost 10,000 soldiers that have just straight up been killed in this war at the moment, and we don't even have a number on the wounded. So we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see the Ukrainians film a missile attack. Going to show you this real quick. This is from a Ukrainian location on the front, but I was totally fine with showing this because first, it doesn't show any geographical locations or landmarks that can have them geolocated, so I'm showing this to y'all just for that reason alone. And so there's not really much to comment on. The Ukrainians ducked for cover inside of a trench, and an explosion blew up in the distance. That's really all we know about that video, and I'm not really wanting to say much about it because it'd be nothing more than assumptions. So we're going to move on to the next bit of video, where we can see an unfortunate occurrence of a Russian drone taking out a Ukrainian Buk anti-air defense system. And so I'm going to let y'all see that video. It appears that the vehicle exploded in an incredibly violent fashion, so I'm very sure that the crew unfortunately wasn't able to make it out of the vehicle, but nonetheless I do try and report as neutrally as possible, and so I try and show any noticeable events that have happened in Ukraine over the course of the day, regardless whether they are Russian or Ukrainian in source. And so we can see the Buk in the field. The projectile hit it soon, and it appears that it had a massive ammo detonation or some kind of cook-off, but I'm very certain, and I hate to say it, that the Ukrainian crew probably did not survive, and I really hate that, but I guess, you know, at the end of the day, we just have to chalk this up to that's war, and on the bright side, this isn't a common occurrence from what we know, and so I really hate to see it, but I've guessed I would report this to y'all because I don't try and hide anything from anyone and just show what's happening in the war. I really hate it though at the same time because I am pro-Ukrainian and I hope they win. But we're now going to move on to the next bit of news where we can see a Ukrainian soldier trying to advertise for his SoundCloud. I'm going to let y'all listen to this. It's pretty cool. And so we heard a little bit of nice music from the guy. It looks like he knows how to play the recorder, if that is a recorder. I think it is, a lot better than me. I never did well at that in school, and it looks like he's doing an incredibly good job at it. So I think he'll have a successful SoundCloud career after this war is over. We're now going to move on to the next bit of news where we can see a load. I mean, like, this entire Russian logistics convoy is made up of civilian vehicles. This is telling me that the logistical problems they're facing are dire. Because it's not even like a small supplement of civilian vehicles backing up the military vehicles. They are having to pretty much draw on nothing but civilian commandeered vehicles to try and supply their units at the front. So I'm going to let y'all see this video. It speaks for itself.
тебе деньги плати. Başlarına sıradık da
Look at that one. I know that this is probably just a normal vehicle in Russia. And I don't want to repeat a leaf spring thing, okay? And don't go off in the comments about that, please, because people get tired of that. But it honestly looks like a Toyota truck that just has had like a tarpaulin cover put on the back. It's weird. I don't know. It looks like some Mad Max stuff to me, kind of like the description said. But anyways, we're gonna let the video continue. Look, they even got buses, I'm guessing. That's kind of weird. And then we also heard the guy make like a weird sound at the end of the video. But nonetheless, you can see clearly that the Russians are having massive logistical issues based off the amount of civilian vehicles they're using. And going off of that, we know that the Russians at the front lines are not in a good shape whatsoever, and most of them probably are not in fighting condition. That is something that has been reflected way too well today, because there have been more prisoners captured on video on this day alone than the entire war, from what I can tell. So I'm going to show you all the first bit of evidence we've gotten of this, and it starts to add up after all these videos today. I would say several dozen Russian soldiers have been captured on film today, and we don't know how many there are that were not filmed. But anyways, here's the video. As we see, there's a Russian soldier that's been captured right there. We can see another one on the ground. And this guy looks like a boy. You know, he looks like he's 17 or 16 years old. He hardly even looks old enough to be in the army. And yet he's out there fighting for Putin. It just tells you what the Russian government's kind of like thoughts are on their people, that they would send boys so young to fight in their wars. You know, here in the United States, you can join the army at 17 years old. Well, you can join the military at 17 years old, as long as your parents sign off on it. But the thing is that this, you know, considering that Russia is a conscript system, you know that they're pretty much conscripting kids. And that's really weird and really messed up.
Откуда?
Из Макеевки.
Хули тут делаешь?
Меня призвали.
Куда призвали? Людей убирать?
Никак нет.
And so, you know, I feel sorry for the poor boy. You know, the boy probably doesn't even know what he's doing there, considering that he's so young. Or he's been told so many things by the Russian government or his Russian commanders. And, you know, he's so young, he just listens to anything, you know, because, you know, young people are impressionable. And he either believed that they have had a cause or not, you know, depending on. I can't really speak for him. I'm not a mind reader or anything, but it's unfortunate to know that the Russians are using young boys to fight their wars. Not anyone that's fighting age 18, 19 years old, 20 years old. It's just 17-year-old, 16-year-old boys. It's very weird to me. It's very, very weird. But we're going to now move on to the outside area, well, the outer areas of Sumy, because you may have also noticed that this front line has changed today as well. Is now not in the middle of Sumy. This was changed yesterday, actually, midstream. It's now further out, and we have evidence today on video to show that the TDFs inside of Sumy have actually pushed out and began to push the Russians back, and they're also using a captured T-72B3 we saw pictures of about a week ago. So I'm going to let y'all see this. It's very good to see, and it's always good to know that the Ukrainians are reclaiming the land that they've lost to the Russian invaders. There's the T-72B3. Going to interject here real quick. We saw this same T-72B3 about a week ago, and the Ukrainians had captured it on the outskirts of Sumy City. And now they are using it against the Russians. It's kind of an ironic thing in a way, that the Russians' weapons are now being used against them. But you can see that right here clearly as it fires into the Russian defensive positions. And look at this. Oh my lord, there's a countless number of Russian prisoners in this video. I'm telling you something. This today, while I've always made assumptions about what the Ukrainians are doing. When you see prisoners being captured, that means that the Ukrainians' offensives are moving at such a fast pace that they're overrunning units to the point that these units are cut off, confused, and so they just surrender. And that's what we're seeing here. And that's what you can get from this. This is clear now. The Ukrainian counteroffensives are doing an untold amount of damage on the Russian positions. Now the Russians aren't even in offensive positions, they're in defensive positions, and now they're overrunning these. And who knows how far the Ukrainians have actually made it today. The Russian Ministry of Defense is probably looking at my map right now, trying to get some ideas of what's going on, because we saw yesterday they pretty much copied my map verbatim, which was really weird to see. But nonetheless,
Раз, два, три, четыре, пять. Эти два наши. Шесть.
Ну так, поверхностно.
now that is wild. Seeing that many prisoners in a single spot is insane. But it gets better. As you see, as we go through the rest of the Eastern Front, this has been repeated everywhere. That was not an isolated event, the two things you saw in Sumy. This is something you will see across the entire front today. Also, there's a bit of a development down here near Kharkiv, but we'll get to that in a minute. We've heard more news today, more good news that shows that the counterattacks by the Ukrainians are doing incredibly well, because now the Ukrainians aren't defending in Okturka, they have recaptured the town of Troishchinets, which is, let me get out a ruler real quick and make sure that I get this right. Let me see if I can get a ruler. There we go. Okturka to Troishchinets. That is 12 miles. Well, we'll do that one again, because I don't really like that measurement. Probably from the outskirts about here. The Ukrainians have advanced about 9 miles from where their defensive positions were a couple of days ago back to the town of Troishchinets. That's 9 miles of a successful counterattack on the Russians. Now, that is huge. Usually, for context, in World War II, the Allied forces in the Western theater of war in Europe were usually able to cover about 10 miles per day on their best days. And we've seen the Ukrainians cover that distance in maybe about a day or two of heavy fighting against a force that's supposedly superior to theirs. But we know at this point, you and I well know that that's not the case anymore. The Russians appear to be a regional power at best, and their military appears to be a group of ragtag young kids at the best as well. And I feel sorry, I gotta say this, I feel sorry for those kids, because first off, they don't have a choice. That's something that always has to be made clear with the Russian conscripts, is that conscripts don't have a choice. They're told that they're going to serve, unlike here in America or Western countries, where you have a choice to sign a contract. That's called a contract soldier. What the Russians have is called a conscript. It's two totally different systems. So when you talk about soldiers in the U.S. or Western Army for that matter, and you say, they get, like I'm just saying it's like a flip side thing. They actually believe in their cause. That's why they're in the military, because they signed a contract. They believe in what the military is doing to a point. Or, here in America, you're usually just trying to get your college paid for or something like that. But over in Russia, that is almost never the case. Most of these boys pretty much are being put into the military just because they were told you have to serve, and you're going to be serving for 1 year right now. And so these kids don't really have any vested interest in this thing, and that probably leads to the morale being just nothing, or so low that it's not even measurable in any sort of positive degree. But nonetheless, I'm going to let y'all see the pictures from inside of Troishchinets today, as the Ukrainians once again recaptured the town. As we can see, there's been some destroyed buildings in the background, but we can see a decent amount of destroyed Russian vehicles, and the Ukrainians posing triumphantly inside the town. And I have to say, I would be triumphant as well if you were pushing back one of the largest countries in the world, at least in everyone's mind. That's a huge achievement. We can see another destroyed Mista. We can now see more Ukrainian TDF forces. I'm assuming that these are TDFs. These may just be regular army. We can see them walking along with the civilians. The civilians, the citizens of Troishchinets must be happy to see the Ukrainians back, because I'm sure that during the Russian occupation of the city, they got no news of the war, or if they got any, they were told the Russians were winning very, very much, or very well, to say that better. And now we can see that they got their Ukrainian army back. We don't know how long the Ukrainian army will be there. Hopefully not long. Hopefully they'll just keep on pushing out of the area of Troistinets and on further. And we can see here that they apparently destroyed destroyed this T-80U, or this T-80U was abandoned in its dug-in location. Not really sure which is which on that, but it's good to see that the Ukrainian forces have pushed back the Russians some 8 to 9 miles from Okturka to Troistinets, and we don't know how far they pushed them back as of this stream, because that news is about 7 hours old at this point, so they may have pushed them back a couple of more miles if that counteroffensive kept up the same momentum and speed. Hopefully they can continue to supply these units that are pushing these offensives really well, because offensives revolve around supply, and if you run out of supply, you can no longer pursue this offensive just because you don't have the ability to. So hopefully Ukrainian logistics are will way leaps and bounds above what the Russians are able to do, and so they can keep these counteroffensives up for days at a time, and then give a few days of rest, of course, for their units to regroup, maybe replace some at the front lines that may be getting exhausted or seeing some kind of fatigue, and then continue that counter attack a couple of days later, hopefully. We can also see some evidence of the Russians losing the town, because it appears that they were firing MLRSs in this video, trying to slow the Ukrainian advance. But I'm going to let y'all see this video. So we can see here the Russian units appear to have been set up. You can also see some mistas here as well, right by this MLRS. This may actually be in Troistinets town during today, when the Ukrainians were fighting for it, because as we saw in the last few pictures, these mistas, well, not these particular ones, but mistas inside of Troistinets have been destroyed and abandoned. So maybe these are the exact same ones we saw in the pictures of Ukraine liberating the town. And this looks a lot like Troistinets town, so maybe so. Nonetheless, it's great news, and I think the Ukrainians are going to be met with nothing more than good news for the coming days. We'll also touch back on that. Make sure to stay around till the international news, because there's been huge developments in that arena. That's why this video has the title it does, because there's been some very serious things that have happened today, which may show that there's something else going on in the background. So we're now going to move on to Kharkiv, where we've had a little bit of developments down here, and we'll cover Izium now because it's kind of in that eastern front area, although I've been classifying it as a southern front thing from now. We were able to confirm today that there is a heavy Russian presence heading towards Izium from the Kharkiv area. We're not really sure if the forces from the south have now met up with them and they've cut off this area or captured it. This eastern part of Ukraine that we haven't shown captured by the Russians. We don't know about the condition of that yet, but we do know that Russian forces have pushed down from the area of Kharkiv towards Izium. But anyways, we're going to move back to the Kharkiv area, where we can see that there is more MLRS action on the Russian side near Kharkiv. Show you all this real quick. I'm not really sure what kind of MLRSs these are. According to the video title, it's an MLRS, but we haven't seen any of these kind, and I've never really seen or heard this kind of MLRS system firing before. So if anyone could get us some information on what these actually are, I'd be very appreciative, but we're going to continue the video. So I'm going to cut this video short because you're getting the picture. It's just the Russians firing some kind of MLRS system towards Kharkiv like normal. But that appears to not be helping them out much, because in the area of Kharkiv today, we've seen that the Ukrainians have taken on a huge number of Russian prisoners once more, much like we saw in the Sumy Troistinets area. Okay, and now y'all are probably going to ask, what's up with the blue tape, because that means they're Ukrainians. It appears that the Ukrainians are using their duct, like their blue duct tape in a way that's used to identify them, to blindfold and also tie up these Russian soldiers. So I'm going to just continue the video.
А вам казали, нехуй шастать.
So you can see there a decent amount of Russian prisoners captured there as well. And y'all know, as well as I, that we have hardly seen any videos of Russian prisoners being captured since the opening week of the war. And so this shows that counteroffensives, considering that they are underway right now, can be reaching some great levels of success that we're just ignorant to because of the fog of war. Because if the Ukrainians were just holding their positions, or they were being pushed back, how come they're overrunning Russian units and taking prisoners? That would suggest that they're in a successful counterattack right now at the moment, generally across the entirety of the country, except for the Kyiv area. We haven't gotten any information on that location yet. But now we're going to move on from Kharkiv, because we've heard no news from inside the city. It appears that things have largely stalled in the actual assault on Kharkiv that the Russians have been trying to commit to for weeks now. And we're now going to move on down to the area of Izium, where we've seen enough Russian troop movements in action to say with definitive certainty that the Russians have reached Izium. This may be an attempt to try and cut off the Ukrainian forces here in the eastern side of the country, if they're still there. We don't really get a lot of video evidence to talk about what's happening in this area at all, so really this is kind of like a black hole of information, and we don't know if the Russians have taken this land or not, but we do know that the Russians are near Izium, and today we saw an Iskander strike near a church inside of the town of Izium. So I'm going to let y'all see that real quick. The church is right here, by the way. This appears to be some kind of larger church complex, maybe a monastery of some sort, but I'm going to let the video continue. I would have to say this is probably a monastery. And what, you know, this is that kind of goofy stuff that always makes you wonder what the Russians, like, what are they even thinking? Like, you can tell, it looks like in this video, there's no Ukrainian forces here. Why are they striking a monastery? You know, if that's what this is, it looks like this whole entire compound is some kind of monastery. Why would they do that? And the simple answer, yeah, this has to be part of the church, like, facility, but, oh, well, there's actually Ukrainian forces there. Never mind. I believe those are. The footage is kind of grainy, but... I can't really tell. Well, yeah, I think those are actually Ukrainian forces, but still, nonetheless, didn't the Iskander strike kind of look a little off? Or was it? Let me check again. No, it was kind of on point with where the vehicles were, so... I guess that's kind of like an unfortunate occurrence that the monastery is there. But nonetheless, it's kind of a loss of a historical building, considering we don't know how long that one's been there. Let's see if we can actually pull up some kind of Izium monastery and see if we can get any information on that specific one. Monastery. Let's see, it doesn't look like there's a specific one in that town. Izium church. Let's see if we get any answers for a church. I don't think it'd be any of those. Well, let's see if we can see any pictures of this church, if there are. Yeah, I'm going to give up on this so that way I'm not eating up y'all's time trying to look for, go on some sort of quest to figure out what church this is. But actually, it looks like they have a decent amount. That one's actually very pretty. I like that one. Anyways, we're going to move on from that. And we're going to move on down to the southern front. This is going at a lightning pace nearly, honestly, without doing the questions. If y'all like that, let me know in the chat, because I know a lot of y'all have been showing a lot of support for it, but I just want to make sure that it's not ruffling any feathers, because if people do want their questions answered, I want to make sure to get to those if you, of course, are supporting the channel and helping me continue to do this kind of work. So we're now going to move on down to the area of Severodonetsk, where we've seen in the town of Rybishny today that there were fires in the sunset. We've only got a picture of this. It appears that it is just some fires. I was going to say oil fires, but I'm not entirely sure. I don't think Ukraine has a large amount of oil fields. I'm not sure if they have any at all. I believe that's why they import most of their oil from Russia. But you can see fires all in the Rubizhny area, which is very unfortunate. It's war in a way, but it's always terrible to see that this kind of damage is being inflicted upon civilization itself, and that people are getting displaced from their homes, killed sitting inside of them, injured and wounded, losing their children. It's terrible to know that this kind of stuff is happening on a day-to-day basis inside of Ukraine, and it's being done by the Russian military. And the Russian military just has no regard for civilian lives or the innocence of civilians. And the thing is that people kind of justify this by saying, oh, well, it's civilians dying as a part of war, and civilians died in Iraq. The thing is that the Russians are going about this war a little bit differently. We still tried to curtail civilian casualties, while there were, of course, civilian casualties, and one would be amiss to not say that civilian casualties are always incurred in war, but there should always be a concerted effort to ensure that there are as few as possible, and the Russians don't look at that at all. They view this as, we are going to fire unguided artillery, like a gun or an MLRS, into a populated area, and just spray and pray in a way, and just hope that we hit the Ukrainians, and if we kill the citizens as well, we don't really care, because we'll just mark that up as an acceptable casualty of war. And that's unacceptable, that a modern army in the 21st century would go about war in such a criminal way. It's distasteful, it's terrible, it violates the rules of war, and people ought to stand up and say that this is wrong and we need to do something about it. But we're going to get to that later, because it appears that a lot of people have finally started to think that way, especially in power. We're now going to move on to the next bit of news in the area of the south, which is in Mariupol. Mariupol has always, of course, been filled with news, because I believe it's one of the only areas that the Russians still have an active offensive in, where they're not currently being pushed back on the defensive, because the Ukrainians are literally handing it to what people believed was one of the most powerful armies in the world. But here in the area outside of Mariupol, in an unknown location, but we know it's at least outside of the city, we can see Russian artillery in action once again as they're trying to bombard the Azov into submission. I'm going to show you all this real quick. So we're now going to move on. There's really not much to say about that. Once again, they're firing unguided artillery into a civilian area and incurring untold numbers of civilian casualties inside of this city, and they just don't care. It's despicable to think that these are the kind of people that, if you get in a war with them, this is what they're going to do. They just don't care about your civilians. The West would care about their civilians. I mean, at least the United States would try. For example, in Iraq or Afghanistan, whenever military commanders there would use white phosphorus, which is a war crime, we would actually prosecute them and charge them for that crime. In Russia, though, that appears not to be the case, and they'll even deny, when we have clear evidence of them using it, that they are even using it at all, and it's sick. We're going to move on to the news inside of the city, where we can see that the Chechens are using a grenade launcher in an urban area. You know what's crazy to me? This is another kind of unguided thing. I know that, a grenade launcher is much more accurate than just a general artillery strike, obviously, but at the same time, it's like just firing a chain of grenades downrange into a building. You don't really know what's in it. There may be Ukrainians in it, Ukrainian soldiers, but you don't know about the citizens. You're just firing this thing willy-nilly at random just in the city. This is just gross. Like, I hate to say that and repeat it, but it's just sickening and disgusting that this kind of behavior is accepted in the Russian military. We're now going to move on to the next bit of news inside of Mariupol, where you can see a Russian tank moving through the city. It appears to be a T-72B3, but nonetheless, that's really all we have. I'm just going to let y'all watch the video.
На, держи. Я забыла, блядь.
Не снимай, Оля. Что, блядь, увидят, блядь, головняк будет.
Он же, он увидел, он мотал рукой.
We're going to try and skip this video a little bit forward.
Идите нахуй, блядь. Здесь дом был разрушенный, блядь. Тихо, тихо. Коля, так и стойте.
And here comes another T-72B3. Another thing I'd like to point out, and this is something that's happened over weeks, and I've said it a couple of times, but I'd love to say it again, is that we can see that the Russians are no longer conservatively marking their tanks with Zs. They've literally put the Zs on every single side and every single surface of the tank, and I believe that's because they've been facing a decent amount of friendly fire, or their units have been less apt to fire due to the confusion on the front, considering that both sides use very similar vehicles, and so it's very hard to identify who's who. And so it looks like they're having to start to mark up their vehicles a lot with Z's on every single part of it as big as they can, so that way the Russians, who are poorly trained already, know which tanks are theirs and which tanks are the Ukrainians. We don't really know the condition inside the city of Mariupol, how well the defenders are holding up, but we do know as of now the city has not fallen, and so we're now going to move on to our last bit of news where we can see the damage in Mariupol. It's once again very disturbing to think that there are civilians living inside of this area. It looks like something out of Stalingrad in World War II, and yet you can see it here, the destruction clear as day, and the disregard the Russians have for civilian lives. You know, Russian units haven't even gotten close to being in this area. This is just indirect bombardments of the city, just for the hell of it. You know, it's disgusting. I really hate it. And you know, I think we're starting to step up and get tired of this over here, and people are starting to do something about it, which is a good thing in my opinion. So, we've actually covered all the news inside of Mariupol. We're not really sure how much longer it will hold, but we do know that they are holding as of today, and we'll just have to see over the coming days the information that comes out and see if there is any evidence of showing whether they're going to fall soon or are they going to hold for a long time. We'll just have to wait and see, but I hope the defenders of Mariupol hold for another week or two. So we're now going to move on past the area of Kherson and Mykolaiv, because we've gotten no news today to show that the Ukrainians nor the Russians have made any pushes or advances or have held their ground in the area. So unfortunately, I can't report as to the situation there. So we're now going to move on towards the area of Sevastopol, where we've seen a little bit of more action today at sea, where a smaller Russian corvette perhaps fired 4 caliber cruise missiles. I'm going to show you this video. The Russians seem to keep on trying to fire as many cruise missiles as they can to try and quell the Ukrainian resistance to their invasion, but it appears that no amount of cruise missiles will ever stop the Ukrainians from defending their land, or even pushing the Russians back to large degrees across the entirety of the country, and even taking them by surprise to the point that they surrender. We're now going to move on to the last bit of news that we've gotten in the southern front, and then we're going to move on to the rest of the national news and then the international news. Now we can see that an anti-air battery in the area of Sevastopol was in action today, as it appears they tried or succeeded to shoot down a Ukrainian drone. So I'm going to let y'all see the footage from both perspectives. Here we can see it from a car, a dash cam. And we see the missiles being fired in the distance. They fire 2 of them. And in this video, I'm not entirely sure if we can actually see proof that whatever they were firing at was shot down. we don't have any information to prove whether the drone was shot down or not. So we're going to look at the next video and its perspective and see what we see from there. It appears that both of the air-to-air missiles exploded. Both of them, it appears to be different locations. So I'm not entirely sure if the drone was shot down, but we do know that the missiles apparently exploded near something up there, but we're not entirely sure as to the exact situation. So, we've now actually covered all the news in the southern front, and so now we're going to move on to the national news and then the international news, and this is why, because a lot of y'all may be new viewers and never saw this, this is why there's now a blue line on the map. We will now move on to the news inside of Lutsk, where we can see today that the Ukrainians shot down a Russian drone near the city. I'll show you all that video right now. So you see the air-to-air missile flying into the distance, and it exploded, apparently destroying the Russian drone along with itself.
Ёб твою мать, ебашит Луцк нахуй. Пиздарики, блядь. Сука, я беру Луцка зараз ебаш. Охуеть, спасибо, папаша.
It's wonderful stuff to see. I'm glad that the Ukrainian air defense is strong, and we do know that as of now, the airspace is still contested and the Russians don't have air superiority at the moment. But that could be subject to change, because we know that the Ukrainian Air Force has taken losses, and they are demanding more aircraft. We don't know if that call will actually be heeded now or not by the West, but we do know that they are taking more aggressive stances than they have been over the past month. We're now going to move down to the area of Lviv, where today we can see two more bits of news, and this is all we've gotten out of the country today. First, we can see cruise missiles flying towards Lviv again. I'm assuming that these may actually be from that Russian ship we saw in Sevastopol. But there it is. And it's heading towards its target. And then in the next video, we can see the aftermath of this missile hitting its target inside of the city of Lviv. It appears that we don't know exactly what they're hitting. It could be, once again, they're hitting civilian targets like they did last time in Lviv. Not entirely sure, but what I can tell you with certainty is that the West has had enough of this. And that's where we're going to move on to the news that led me to put down the description and thumbnail I put today. As it appears that the President of the United States has said in very clear terms that he has called Putin a butcher and claims that Putin cannot stay in power any longer, and even went as far to demand the assassination of Vladimir Putin. This is a large escalation from the wordage that we've heard from Western leaders over the past few weeks, really the past month as a whole. And it goes to show that there may be some very serious developments going on behind the scenes that none of us are privy to, but we may learn about in the future within the coming days, weeks, or maybe even years, depending on how sensitive the information is. Here in this link, I have the entire unedited speech that President Biden gave today inside of Warsaw, Poland, and we'll go to that in a minute, but I'm first going to talk about what happens if we do go to war, minus the nukes. Of course, everyone knows that mutually assured destruction is a thing, but what would happen if NATO went to war with Russia and Russian-aligned countries, which is really just Belarus? What we do know is that Putin has clearly said, and it's very clear at this point with how poorly Russia is conducting itself inside of Ukraine, that invading Russia, in terms of a Western response, would really be just nothing more than a cakewalk. To do this really quick, because I think this would be very important to know, from the closest area of this supposed front line if we were to go to war, and I'm not saying I'm wishing we're going to war, I'm just saying that based off of what Biden said in his speech today, it appears that war has never been closer. So let me just get that out there so that way everyone's not thinking I'm some kind of warmonger or something. It just looks like things are going in the direction I said a while ago, and that's that World War III appears to be just a matter of time at this point. And I do truly think that, because the historical context behind this shows that this is nearly the lead up to World War II in terms of the economic responses that have been taken, the stances that both sides are taking. And while nuclear power is now at play in this war, it still has the same telltale signs of World War II in it. Anyways, from the closest area on the Estonian border to St. Petersburg, the distance that the West would have to cover to reach the outskirts of St. Petersburg is 74 miles. We're going to leave that there and just put that right there so that way we can make sure to keep note of that. The West would have to cover 73 miles to reach the second largest city inside of Russia, outside of Moscow. Also considering that they would probably start targeting cities inside of Belarus as well, because Belarus would probably get involved. We're not really sure about that, though, considering they haven't got involved in the Ukrainian war. They may decide to sit out on this war as well if it was to happen. But let's just say that Belarus got involved as well. And down the major road, the West would try and take Minsk. So let's see how far that is for the West to have to go. Really, it's the same distance, about 75 miles. So, two of the major cities that would be in a Russian-aligned side, Russian alliance, we'll call it, during a war in between the West and the East, are within 70 miles of this front line currently. And so that puts them in a very precarious situation, but we do have to remember that the Russians do have some things they could pull out their sleeve as well in a potential kind of war. For example, here in between the area of I'm going to call this East Prussia. I know it's called Kaliningrad now, but it's really just East Prussia, and they kind of like halved it after the war. But there's this small little area here where the E67 and the and Road 16, we're just going to call that Road 16, pass from Poland to Lithuania, which appears to be a choke point that the Russians could try and take advantage of. This little gap here is only about 40 miles in width. So going off of that, we can assume that it wouldn't be too tough for the Russians if this was a poorly defended part of a front line. It wouldn't be too tough for the Russians to actually just close this little gap and cut off the Baltic states from any kind of supply routes heading from the rest of the NATO alliance, and that would put the NATO logistical chains entirely in the Baltic Sea, which will require NATO to divert a whole bunch of naval resources there to ensure that these supply lines wouldn't be cut off, and then the whole entire Baltic area would pretty much be inside of its own kind of internal supply lines and working on empty in a way. So beyond that, the real truth of the matter is that if you look at Ukraine, which, I mean, like, if we're looking at it honestly, it's not like Ukraine is a first-rate military or anything. They're pretty run-of-the-mill, if not average. And considering that the Russians are getting beat by pretty much the modern equivalent of Finland in the Winter War of 1939, it tells me very well, and I'm sure it gives y'all the picture, that if they were to go up in a war toe-to-toe with countries like the United Kingdom, France, or the United States, it would be a pretty one-handed sided fight, you know, with the West just leveling the Russian military and just rolling through like it was the Iraq invasion in 2003. That's my honest opinion. That's not being biased in any way, because if you look at how the Russians are performing in Ukraine, there's just no way they could stand up to a competent Western army with an unlimited budget like the United States has practically. So that being said, I think I've elaborated a huge deal on what I'm thinking about the aggressive stance that the West is now taking against Russia, as per the words of the president. And so now I'm going to go to President Biden's speech and let y'all listen to it, because his wordage was very clear and plain. While they did backtrack that later, apparently they had the press secretary come out and say that he really didn't mean it that way. It was pretty clear that at the time, with him speaking frankly, that this was really what's going on behind the scenes, and he just said it for what it was. So I'm going to let y'all see the speech. Unfortunately, I had to go to the Washington Post, but I'm going to mute this ad just in case if there's anything copyrighted about it or something. You know, I don't know how YouTube looks at ads. And of course, it's a double non-skippable ad. And I don't do that to my viewers. I think this is kind of a little trashy, but we're now going to move on, skip forward, Well, I also thank the Washington Post because this was actually the only unedited version I could find. And while I don't like the mainstream news, I respect that they didn't edit this thing to hell and back and put in a whole bunch of commentary. So anyways, I'm going to back this up a little bit so y'all can hear some clips of what he said today and get an idea of where the West's stance is.
My message to the people of Ukraine is a message I delivered today to Ukraine's foreign minister and defense minister, who I believe are here tonight. We stand with you. Period. Today's fighting Kyiv and Metropolitan Kharkiv of the latest battle in a long struggle. Hungary, 1956. Poland, 1956, and then again, 1981. Czechoslovakia, 1968. Soviet tanks crushed democratic uprisings. But the resistance continued until finally, in 1989, the Berlin Wall and all the walls of Soviet domination, they fell. They fell. And the people prevailed. But the battle for democracy could not conclude and did not conclude with the end of the Cold War. Over the last 30 years, the forces of autocracy have revived all across the globe. Its hallmarks are familiar ones.
So I'm going to cut this off. I actually was just told that y'all can't really hear this too well, and I don't get into American party politics, so I'm not going to draw a side onto whether I agree or disagree with the current president. His actions are representative of the country at the moment. But what we can get is the idea that the line was drawn yesterday, and now it appears that it's being kind of like ramped up a little bit in terms of the escalation of tensions between the West and the East, and we're going to have to see how that pans out in the future in a way, because it seems like things are only getting more and more tense from here, and it doesn't look like there's any stepping down at the moment from either side. So we'll have to see how this develops. And so that being said, we've actually covered all of the news for today. But before everyone leaves, because I know everyone's about to leave, we're actually going to take a break on Monday. I've been doing this for about 31 days. By the time of Monday, it'll be the 33rd day. And so I'm going to take a break because I've been doing this every day, about 7 to 8 hours a day for 31 days straight at this point. And so I would just like to have a little break, and I hope y'all understand. I'll make sure to try and cover both of those days on Tuesday's stream. Monday and Tuesday will both be covered on Tuesday. And we're going to see if we'll make that a normal schedule thing as to not having a stream on Monday. But once again, I hope y'all can understand, and I thank y'all all so much for supporting the channel and listening to the news. It means a lot to me, and I'm glad that a lot of people find worth and value in it. And so that being said, we're now going to move on to the questions for tonight. And before we begin, how many questions do we have, Matthew?
So it looks like in total we have about 38 questions, with about 20 to 25 of those being super chats.
All right, so let's start with the first question.
All right, and let's see here. Our first question of the night is from Potent X01 with a $22 donation. They say, I don't know if I'll be around for the next fundraiser, so please donate 5 of these dollars to whichever charity. I love the show. It's super informative, very friendly atmosphere and fun chat. Leaf Springs and salmon. Slava Ukraine.
Thank you very much, and we'll make sure to send some Leaf Springs and sockeye salmon your way. We know that everyone loves a bit of Leaf Springs and sockeye salmon in the comments, so we're going to make sure to get that out to y'all as soon as possible. But thank you once again for the support, and Matthew, if you could make a written note for me to add $5 to my usual $100 donation, we'll make sure to send that towards tomorrow's fundraiser. I'm not going to tell everyone exactly what tomorrow's fundraiser will be, but I hope y'all do like the nonprofit that we picked. And so we're going to move on to the next question.
Okay, and the next donation is from Sammy Hanish. He puts in a donation of $20. Thank you very much for your support. The next question is from Ruben Coolidge. He puts in a donation of $20 and says, huge thanks to you and all the mods for the streams. I love them. Keep up the good work. Slava Ukraine.
Thank you very much for the support, and I bet the mods love to know that they are loved as well. And so we're going to move on to the next question, and thank you once again for the support.
All right, and the next question is from Flying Potato, putting in a donation of $10. He says, Should you ever consider inviting another guest speaker, I would really recommend Brian Whitmore. He's really knowledgeable about the subject, worked for RFE, RL, and affiliated with the Atlantic Council, etc.
Well, thank you very much for the suggestion. We have been thinking about maybe bringing on another guest. We've gotten a lot of suggestions as well, like Mark Felton, Speak the Truth, and so on. So we may look into trying to do a guest speaker again, but we're not going to do it in the format that we did last time, where we just have an opinion piece. They will have to contribute something to the stream in a way, at least in terms of information or knowledge, because this channel was never really started as an opinion piece. And while I was wanting our guest last night to provide some kind of insider information, it appears that they went off the rails and went delusional. So I thank you very much for the support once again, and we're going to look into that if possible. So thank you very much, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And I just want to quickly say for all the viewers on the channel at the moment, I have noticed many comments of people mentioning the Russian bots in the chat, and I do apologize for the sort of lack of keeping up with it tonight. We have a couple of mods in training, and we're currently trying to get them acclimated to sort of moderating the chat. So please bear with us tonight. We are working on it. And with that being said, as the enforcer loves to say, we're moving on to the next question. So the next one is from Tito McLovin, longtime channel supporter. He puts in a donation of $10 and says, destroyed rail bridges and trains can be replaced or repaired. SBU should eliminate all Russian train engineers. Overlooked Achilles' heel of their logistics. Saves lives on all sides, plus Ukrainians win.
That's true. I believe the Ukrainians are winning regardless of doing anything extra at this point. It appears they're just winning the ground war on their own. It's really a miracle, honestly, because no one expected this to happen. But it's kind of like the Sino-Polish War of 1920, the Winter War of 1939. The Russians are just getting it handed to them as usual in the minor wars that they pick to fight, and then they figure out that they really can't fight well at all. And the only time they can fight is when the existence of their country is at stake. That seems to be the only time they actually rebound. But I do agree that that is a viable tactic when kind of like putting all morals out the window of just trying to go and kill all the train engineers. But at the same time, that would be kind of hard to do because you'd have to have so many assassins operating in the country, and you'd have to try and kill them all in such a short amount of time that I don't really think it'd be feasible, even if the moral implications were not on the table. But I thank you very much for the suggestion once again. A couple of people have actually brought that up, and it is a decent idea. I just don't think it's feasible or something that the Ukrainians would like in the history books in a way. But I thank you once again, and so we're going to move on to the next question.
And real quickly, I just want to recognize a $20 donation from Freedom First. Thank you very much for your support. Our next question of the night is from Ron Edwards. He puts in a donation of $10 and says, if you are going to reduce the number of presentations, why not just do 2 out of the week that have no Q&A and pure news? Also, why don't all soldiers have helmets?
I'm not really sure as to why all soldiers don't have helmets. I really can't answer that. Maybe they do have helmets. It's just that they're not wearing them. I'm not entirely sure because not issuing helmets in some cases is a bad move because artillery and shrapnel alone can kill someone really quickly and easily, and that's really what the purpose of a helmet is to protect the wearer from shrapnel from artillery bursts, more so than actually being shot from a bullet. Moving on from that, they're trying to cut back a little bit. The thing is that if people are supporting the channel and they have questions, I can't go without answering their questions because they're supporting the channel and they're helping me do what I do every day. And I've got to thank every single one of them, at least in like taking the time to respond to their question or acknowledging that they're helping me do what I do. So I understand the idea of trying to scale back, but at least keep it a daily thing. But unfortunately, I wouldn't want to pretty much do that to my viewers. I don't really feel like it's right, and I don't really like the idea all too much. So if there are streams and people do have super chats with questions attached, I'm always going to answer them because I want to thank everyone who helps me out in doing what I do, which is reporting this news all the time. So I think we'll still stay to Monday's going to be an off day. So for everyone to know in advance, and I'm going to say this tomorrow too during the fundraiser, Monday will be an off day. There will be no stream at 10 p.m. Eastern time for the first time. And we're going to see if that'll become a regular thing in the schedule or if it's just a one-off thing for me to recharge that day and then get right back at this day after day. So thank you very much once again for the suggestion, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And also, Zeta Lane, you are actually the next question I have. Zeta Lane puts in a donation of $10 and says, I am still in shock that Putin could ever have thought this army was ready for an offensive. Any idea that would account for it? He must have been horribly misinformed. I wonder if heads will roll.
I believe that he was horribly misinformed. I believe that he was actually he was acutely aware of the situation in the Russian army, considering how incompetent they are. And I believe he knows that very, very much so. I think the thing that was misreported to him was the resistance that the Ukrainians would give. Because on the first day, and I'm going to go through this just because it's been such a long time since the first day of the war that I feel like it would be pertinent to cover it again. But when the VDV arrived at Hostomel, there was only 200 soldiers. They airlifted them in, and they gave them no support whatsoever, and they were expected to hold that airport until the Russian spearhead down the highway made it there, and then that airport would be used to airlift in more troops. It was kind of like a 1979 invasion of Afghanistan kind of thing in terms of the actual strategy. The problem with it is that shows that they expected no resistance from the Ukrainians at the Hostomel airport because these troops were incredibly small in number and they were given absolutely no support. So the Russians assumed that the Ukrainian resistance would be almost non-existent, and 200 troops with no support could hold that airport until the Russian spearhead arrived and relieved the airport and its position. So that tells me that one move right there, and there's a whole bunch of others that happened on the first day that would show this to be the case. They didn't overestimate the abilities of their army. They underestimated the ability of Ukraine's defense. And that's what led them into this mistake they have right now. So I hope I've answered that question in a way. It's very interesting to look at, and it's been very clear to me. But once again, this is all assumptions based off of public information that I've been able to gather in putting together this map every day. But that's what I've been able to collect so far. So I hope that's a pretty good answer. I hope I answered it pretty well. Thank you once again for the support. It means a lot to me and helps me to continue to run the channel. And so we're going to move on to the next question.
And our next comment of the night is from OM, putting in a donation of $20. Thank you very much for the support. He says, thank you for the commentary and well-researched analysis.
Well, thank you very much for the support. Sometimes I do let my bias show. I am pro-Ukrainian, and I think the Russian invasion is entirely immoral, wrong, and unlawful. And so sometimes my reporting does get biased, but I'm glad that you enjoy the commentary, and I thank you so much once again for the support. It means a lot to me, and it helps me to continue to run this channel. And so that being said, I thank you very much once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question of the night is from Gandalf TW. He puts in a donation of $10 and says, if Ukraine was expecting to be attacked, wouldn't they have stockpiled food and arms to be prepared for long defense in strategic places like Mariupol? If so, the resistance there might go on longer.
The thing is that I would agree with you that if they were preparing for an invasion, they would have stocked up on food and ammunition. But as far as we know, the Ukrainians were actually taken off guard by this invasion because while they knew the situation was intense and the Russians may invade, everyone at the time believed that this was nothing more than political posturing from Russia to try and make the Ukrainians second-guess their decisions and kind of lean more towards the Russian side of thinking. So when the invasion actually occurred, I think they were taken off guard and they didn't expect this. Or maybe they did, because as we saw on the first day, the Ukrainian resistance was actually incredibly stiff. So maybe they did. I don't know. So considering that we don't really know whether that is the case or not, whether they were just playing innocent like they didn't know while they were still preparing for war or not, if that is the case and they did stockpile weapons, food, and such inside of the city of Mariupol and other cities around the country, that may suggest the reason why they are defending these cities so well and the reason why the Russians haven't overrun them yet. So thank you very much for the comment. That's actually a very interesting input on it. And I thank you once again for the support. It once again helps out the channel a lot, and it means a lot to me because it helps me keep doing what I do. And so I thank you very much once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question is from Jazz A.M. Craffen, who puts in a donation of $10 and says, humor has been a great help to deal with what a messed up situation this is. Glory to the Ukrainian people. And with that being said, let's move on to the next Leaf Spring.
Well, I thank you very much for the support and bringing in everything that this channel has pretty much turned into, which is that being said, Leaf Springs, and a couple of other things. So I thank you very much once again. it means a lot to me that I have a lot of supporters of this channel that will back it through and through. And I thank you all very much once again for coming and watching tonight. I know that last night went off the rails a pretty good bit in every direction, but we're now moving on. Hopefully all that has passed and mistakes were made, lessons were learned, and the future will hopefully be better than ever. And so I thank you all once again for supporting the channel, and I thank you very much once again for your donation, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question is from EthanTube98. He puts in a donation of $10 and says, "These are pretty scary times. I hope everyone is staying as safe as they can be. I also hope to see you in War Thunder sometimes. I'm on that 8.0 BR tank grind right now, so I might need a sip."
Hey, I know what you're talking about, man. Just an aside, I know everyone's here for the news, but I am a huge War Thunder fan. The A10 came out, and everyone thought it'd be terrible, but that's actually like the best plane in the game right now. So if any of y'all are War Thunder fans or play games in your free time, make sure to go check out War Thunder. I enjoy the game a lot. A lot of people complain about it, but honestly, I just think they're kind of, whining about it because they've gotten tired of some things and gotten used to how it is, but thank you very much for the support. And hey, I mean, like, maybe I'll join you on the 8.0 tank grind sometime. Shoot me a DM in Discord, and maybe I'll see if when I have free time, about playing with you for a little bit. I actually do have something going on with another YouTuber. Again, he asked me to get involved with a video, so I'm going to be kind of like a guest in that video. But anyways, thank you very much once again for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question of the night is from Level 70, who puts in a donation of $10. They say, "How badly will the Ukrainian offensive be impacted by all their oil depots being destroyed? Will they be able to refill their vehicles?"
I would assume so, because we've never seen... Well, we actually have seen a decent amount of... Well, not a decent amount, a small amount of Ukrainian vehicles being abandoned. I don't know if it's due to a lack of fuel, or maybe these vehicles broke down and they couldn't, repair them in a way. I guess that's the best way to say that. But I don't really think it's hampering their logistics too much, because it seems like, at least in the videos that we're getting and the picture we can create out of these videos, it seems that Ukrainian vehicles aren't really having a problem with fuel, at least from what we can see. And so I don't think it's causing too much of a hamper, but we do know that when supplies are destroyed, they're always going to cause some kind of shockwave to some degree. So I'm not really sure how big that shockwave is every time that fuel silo is destroyed, but we do know that, in a sense, it's not causing too much damage to them at the moment. But we'll have to see in the coming days if this war keeps on going at the pace it's going. It may last for months, and so we'll have to see in the coming weeks, probably, if that actually starts to affect the Ukrainians in any meaningful way. So I thank you very much for the support, and that's a really good question, actually. But once again, we don't really know a lot about Ukrainian logistics, and all we can get is based off of the video evidence we have. But I thank you very much once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question is from Kirky Kardashian, putting in a donation of $5. They say, "I just wanted to say that I believe the situation with Moscow Mike and the mods was handled correctly by the enforcer and the team. Thank you for your hard work."
Thank you very much. We had a whole bunch of, well, actually, probably a lot of y'all are on the Discord. Maybe some of y'all aren't, because there's a load of y'all on here. But hey, by the way, if y'all would like, make sure to go join the Discord. There's a link in the description below, and you'll always get updates from me when the streams are about to start and when they go live. And also, I try and hang out with the fans and the viewers inside the Discord server whenever I can, although I'm really busy and it kind of happens rarely. So if you kind of want a clarification as to what happened with the mods, you can go and join the Discord, and you can read in the announcements section what happened with them, what they were saying, and why it wasn't true at all, in a way. And there's evidence to back up some of them that's pretty hardcore. But I thank you very much once again for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question is from Zeta Lane once again with another donation. "Thank you very much for the continued support." She says, "I hope you will consider looking into bringing on others to be guests, like maybe Ben Hodges. Slava Ukraine."
Slava Ukraina. And we are thinking about it. It's just that for the guest, the first one to come on, to do so poorly, it's like, is it even a segment that's worth continuing? I mean, like, I think someone who actually provides some information would be valuable, but even at that, like, just the concept of it went so poorly on its first run. I'm not really sure if we'll be bringing that back. I'll probably run another poll on the channel to see if people would like a guest speaker to come on that actually has something to provide in terms of news instead of just rhetoric. But I thank you once again for the support, and we're looking into that at the moment. So we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up is a question from Jeremanator. He says, I liked running through all the news like last night and questions afterwards. Maybe just cap at a specific number daily, like maybe 100 questions.
Wow, that's a lot of questions. Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I'm glad that you like the new format. Hopefully, a lot of our donors who support the, well, not really donors, but our supporters who help out this channel running don't find offense to this, because I'd hate that, because they're the people who keep this thing running. So we'll have to see if there's any problems with that. But I thank you all once again for the support, and that with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question is from Mel Thornell. He says, your map on the east side of the river north of Kiev is actually wrong. Not even the Russian map the other day had them that close.
I do agree, but the thing is that I'm hesitant to change that, because one, we do see fighting in Troishina, and how do we explain Russian forces being there? And there's really no other way for me to explain Russian forces present near the area of Troishina, rather than they must have moved past Chernihiv and down this way. We will look into changing that though, but the presence of Russian forces must be explained. So either the breakthrough succeeded over here where we have this yellow front line and has actually made it all the way to Brovary, or they bypassed Chernihiv and went down there one way or another. So it's either they came from Chernihiv or they came from the area of Perluki, but I'm not entirely sure, so that front line hasn't changed yet. Because we don't have enough information to actually make that change viable. But I thank you very much for the info and the input, and I do understand where you're coming from. It's just that I am not really certain about making that change to the map yet. And you do have to remember at the same time, the Russians are stealing my map. And if I have to go back to yesterday and show you all that again, this is the Russian map, like that they officially published yesterday, and it's almost mine. So, you know, I mean, like, there's got to be some credibility to what I'm doing. Maybe they haven't made it down there, but we'll have to see. So I thank you very much for the input. We'll look into it, and so we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question of the night is from VMan29397. He says, if Ukraine retakes Kherson, can they use it as a springboard for a counteroffensive to cut off the southern force from its supplies in Crimea?
They could. I believe, though, because we do have a little bit of information suggesting that the Russians did break out of Kherson and start heading towards the town of Snehurivka, and also further up towards Zoloda Balka. We have had information that says they may be up there, but we haven't gotten any video evidence to support that claim. So if the Ukrainians manage to push out Mykolaiv and retake Kherson, they will now have cut off these forces up here from supply, except for the Novokakhovka hydroelectric dam, which also has a road going over it. So that will seriously hinder the Russian supply situation, and they may be able to push along the northern bank of the Dnieper River towards Novokakhovka and cut these forces off entirely, if there are any, from their supply lines, and have a large encirclement occur here, which would be a serious disaster for the Russians. But I thank you very much for the support. And yes, to answer the question a little bit more, they could just probably shoot straight into Kherson and then immediately over the bridge and then start spreading out through here. Although I think that they would probably be playing it much safer to just push along the northern bank of the Dnieper River and then encircle the Russians that are caught on the other side if there are any left. So I thank you very much once again for the support, and I hope that answers the question in a good way, and we're going to move on to the next question.
All right, and the next question of the night is from Joseph Neves. He puts in a donation of $40. Thank you very much for the support. They say, can you play a few minutes of the speech? If not, that's fine. However, I think it's important to see how the U.S. comes across. The later part of the speech, Biden addresses the Russian people. Slava Ukraine, thank you guys for doing this.
Well, actually, we will take a break from the questions for just a second, because I know that the audio can't be heard too well. But I would like for the speech to be seen at least a little bit longer. So we will play a little bit of the speech. Everyone bear with us, because, you know, I think it's a very important thing. That's kind of where the video got its just like thumbnail and title today, was from this one event. So we are going to revisit it for a second, and I'm going to see.
Discover great prices on the freshest
We're going to see about trying to get the audio louder in some way. So everyone bear with me for just a second. I'm probably going to pop up a card and just turn up the volume to max on everything and see if that'll fix the problem. We'll skip forward to the 37-minute mark as well. and just start the speech from there. So give me just a second. I'll be right back. Alright, so I'm going to have to pop that card back up after the speech is over, so that way I can adjust Matthew's audio level, so that way he's not so loud he's raping everyone's ears. But anyways, here's the speech. Oh, it's muted. Sorry about that.
The words of Pope John Paul burn as brightly today. Never, ever give up hope. Never doubt. Never tire. Never become discouraged. Be not afraid. A dictator bent on rebuilding an empire will never erase a people's love for liberty. Brutality will never grind down their will to be free. Ukraine will never be a victory for Russia, for free people refused to live in a world of hopelessness and darkness. We will have a different future, a brighter future, rooted in democracy and principle, hope and light, of decency and dignity, of freedom and possibilities. For God's sake, this man cannot remain in power. God bless you all, and may God defend our freedom, and may God protect our troops. Thank you for your patience. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, that's actually the end of the speech right there, so it was kind of a little short, but I hope that y'all kind of got the idea. And he actually said right there at the end, and you heard it from him first. And before I do that, let me pop up this card real quick and go through and adjust the audio so that way Matthew isn't blasting everyone's eardrums out. So there we go. So Matthew should be able to talk now pretty reasonably at a good volume. But as you can see, he clearly said it right there at the end. Putin cannot remain in power. It was a clear statement. Let me make sure I say that right. He should not remain in power. It's kind of like a suggestive thing that something will happen to throw him out of power, or it's just very fiery rhetoric that's showing that the Western governments have had enough of this stuff. One way or the other, not really delving into the American political stuff, because I do see that the chat's kind of getting embroiled in that stuff. And y'all have got to remember, I don't try and pick political sides. I just show what's going on. So, you know, I hope y'all respect that. I'm not trying to make anyone look good or bad. I'm just trying to show what's going on. But anyways, that is what he said. He said it clearly, and I hope you liked watching a few extra minutes of the speech. Unfortunately, it appears that I called it pretty much at the end. But thank you once again for your support, and I hope that answers your question a little bit in a way. And I thank you once again for saying that you like the streams as well. And so we're going to move on to the next question.
Okay, and just real quickly, something has happened where a legend of the channel is not able to comment for some reason, and it is none other than Knuckles. He's just very short of a channel legend, basically. But I'm going to go ahead and ask his question. He has sent it to me on Discord. He said, I just wanted to say that the White House was quick to release a statement, both on the comment Biden made to the 82nd Airborne yesterday and what was said today, saying it was not a call for regime change and was meant for the region and neighbors.
I did hear that as well, and they did backtrack it incredibly quickly, but I believe that that was kind of a damage control measure to make sure that the actual true statements and intentions of the West didn't come out as clearly and plainly to Russia as what they're thinking behind the scenes. So I think that was really more of a slip on the president's part of saying something that really wasn't supposed to be said, and then they came out and tried to, I guess, do a little bit of damage control and make sure that Russia doesn't think that we're putting it on the table that we may go in there and do a regime change of sorts. But that's how I'm looking at it. Everyone, of course, can look at that in different ways because considering that they came out and clarified it so quickly, it may have just been a slip of the tongue or he was speaking his mind or something like that. But I do thank you for the comment, Knuckles, and I hate to hear that you can't comment on the live chat because we haven't done anything to stop that. Maybe it's some kind of glitch, but if you would like to reach out to Matthew, he's going to look into it and see what the case of that is, because that's weird to me. But I thank you very much once again for your continued support, although you weren't able to tonight. That's fine. You've helped us out loads, and I thank you so much for the question. It was a good question and a statement, and so we're now going to move on to the next question.
And the next question of the night is from Robert Massey III. He puts in a donation of $10 and says, do you think there is really a chance of a coup to actually happen in Russia? And what do you think the future would look like for Russia if that were to occur?
I do not know if there would be the possibility of a coup, because the guy I kind of look to be the coup man, Sergei Shoigu, has disappeared, and no one knows where he is. At least that's the information we've heard. That may be false. That may be some kind of propaganda of a sort, kind of coming from our side. But it sounds like Sergei has disappeared. And the thing is that he was kind of the guy I was looking at that would lead a coup if there was to be one, because he's kind of in the position to operate a coup, if anyone is in a position to operate one in Russia. So I'm not really sure, considering that he's kind of disappeared and we don't really know what's happened to him, if it would be successful or not. So I really can't say either way, because I really can't think of anyone else that is that you can kind of think of being on the fence with Putin that would stand up against him. So at the moment, I'm going to have to say I don't really think that a coup would be possible or succeed at the moment. I believe it's entirely reliant on Sergei Shoigu being present and kind of spearheading the thing, at least in my opinion. But I thank you once again for the support, and I'm glad that was actually a really good question. The question of a coup has popped up here and there, but I liked that one tried to go into a little bit more detail onto the actual specifics of if a coup would succeed or not. So I thank you once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And real quickly, I just want to recognize a $10 donation from King Luther. Thank you very much for your support. We certainly do appreciate it. Let's see here. Our next question is from Dip, Dive, and Duck. He says, check out Operator Starsky on YouTube. He is a Ukrainian soldier and reports every 2 to 7 days since day 18. He looks legit.
I'll take a look into him. I think I heard about him last night as well, and it does sound like something we'll try and look into. It's just that I have kind of like my schedule and my pattern as to where I find my sources and gather them in a way. So it's always hard to break a habit, but I will try and look into that tomorrow, and maybe we'll bring him up tomorrow or ask him to be a guest speaker in the future after the fundraiser stream. So I thank you once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
All right, and just a heads up, we have about, let's see, about 10 or so super chats left. So if I haven't gotten to yours yet, don't worry. We are coming right up to it. The next one is from Caffeine. He says, that guy was Freddie Mercury with the 50 cal LMG. He faked his death. Where's the video with Elvis fighting for Ukraine? Get on that, Enforcer.
We're trying to find that right now. We're also trying to find Tupac as well, because we know he's somewhere over there. But we'll try and get that out to y'all as soon as possible if we can. Thank you very much for the support and the little joke there. I like that one. That was a pretty good one, because he did kind of look like Freddie Mercury in a way, I guess. But we're going to move on to the next question.
All right, and I just want to recognize a donation from American Pit Bulls for a donation of $5. Thank you very much for the support. Our next question is from Justin Miller. He says, do you know if Finland is helping the Ukrainians at all?
I think they did supply arms to. It's such a long time ago that I really can't remember exactly everything, but I think they did pledge to supply some kind of arms to them at some point. I'm not entirely sure what it was or how much, but I do think that they have supported the Ukrainians a little bit, and they also showed willingness to join NATO a couple of weeks ago, which became a little bit of a fiery thing in between Finland and Russia for a short while. So I believe they have, but I really can't remember exactly. So take that with a grain of salt, because I'm not really sure if that was on stream or not weeks ago. I'm so tired I can't remember what's what. The days kind of all jumbled together. But I thank you once again for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question is from That Frost Wolf. He says, do you think some people are supporting Ukraine's fight in non-conventional ways like cyber warfare or help with intel, for example?
Yes, we do see that a good bit. Anonymous has, of course, been kind of the one that we know of doing the most damage. We know that they hacked the Russian central bank a couple of days ago, although I don't think I put that on stream. There's a lot going on in the background. It's just the thing with the cyber warfare stuff is that for some reason I just never find information about it, and so I don't put it on stream. And also, it's something that you really can't elaborate on. It's really just an action, like they hacked the central bank, and that's it. I mean, like, there's really nothing more I can add to it, and there's really nothing about those specific actions that really contribute to the exact occurrences on the front line. We do know that the United States appears to be providing Ukraine with the Maxar satellite images and footage, which is showing them where Russian locations are and such things like that. So we do know that they're getting a lot of support in the cyber area in terms of cyber warfare and also things like surveillance. So I hope that answers your question a pretty good deal. Thank you once again for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And just so everybody knows, I'm getting several messages on Discord about people not being able to do super chats, and some people aren't able to comment for some reason. So it appears we're having a stream-wide problem, and I'm not sure if that's a deliberate issue that we've been sort of sabotaged by somebody, or if we're having a technical issue. So we are going to look into that after the stream and see what the issue is and get that resolved, so that way everybody can still put their comments in. So our next comment of the night is from That Frost. Well, excuse me, I've already read that one. So the next one is from Life After Dark, who puts in a $5 donation. Thank you very much for the support. Also, Frank Schifrin puts in a $5 donation as well. Thank you as well for the support. Our next question is from the Vladinator. He says, in Mariupol, as it's desperate, do you think they could have fishing nets to get some fish or using rods? Regards from the land of Australia.
I think they may be able to, but you got to remember that the Russians are really, at least the Russian army is a really spooky kind of force in a way, because they will smack anything they see moving anywhere, and that's really the truth. And so people have to be very careful when going out anywhere, especially near the shoreline, because the Russians may assume that what they're holding isn't a fishing rod or a net. You know, they may think it's something like a javelin or a stinger or something, and then whack them with a cruise missile or an MLRS barrage just to prove a point. So while I do think they probably could, the other question is this water polluted in the Mariupol area? Because if the water's polluted, you know, while eating fish will sustain you, it's like, are the fish even edible in a way? But I thank you very much for the question. It's an interesting one. I'm not really sure about that as specific detail. It's a kind of a minute one, and there's a lot of factors at play as to whether someone can actually fish on the Mariupol coast or not. But I thank you once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
All right, and the next question up is from Tito McLovin again. He comes back with a $5 donation and says, does the Danish Navy blockade Russian shipping like the Turks blockade the Bosphorus?
Can you say that question one more time? I don't really think I caught it.
He says, does the Danish Navy blockade Russian shipping like the Turks block the Bosphorus?
I don't think so, because I think that Danish waters are a little bit of a different ordeal than the rest of the world. But let's pull that up. Danish Territorial. Oh, I spelled Danish really wrong. Not going to get a result with that. Territorial waters. Let's see. Okay. So it seems that there's a very small little area here. I'm not sure if that would be under Swedish waters or not, that the Russians could slip through. But I want to make sure that the Swedish don't own that as well. So we're going to type in Swedish territorial waters and see if that encompasses the remaining area. And it appears that it does. I don't really think... I mean, like, that's a really broad assumption. Let's just pull up that question. Has Sweden, as Denmark, barred Russia? Has Denmark banned Russia? Let's see if Denmark has banned Russian aircraft from entering its airspace in response to Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. It doesn't appear that they blocked them from their territorial waters, because Denmark banned Russia. Let's just put in water and see if we get anything with that. Looks like they haven't banned Russian ships from ports even in the European Union, so I don't think that's the case. So I hope that answers your question pretty well. That's actually territorial waters is something I really haven't looked into a lot, and that was kind of delved into a little bit last night. And I think we'll start delving into that a lot more, because it's actually a very interesting thing what territorial waters encompass. But I thank you very much for the support. Hope that answers the question a little bit. We tried to pull up some information there to get an idea, and it appears that they haven't banned them from their territorial waters, nor have the Swedish. So Russian ships have free reign to pass through kind of like the straits around Denmark. But I thank you once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question of the night is from Trademarks and Patents for Growing Businesses. He says, great job, guys.
Thank you very much. I'm glad that you support the channel. I know that you've been a return donor, and it means a lot to me. Let me make sure I get your name right. Trademarks and Patents for Growing Businesses, that you're continuing to support our channel. We are a growing business in a way, and I hope to report the news like this to y'all for as long as I can on all kinds of topics that will extend beyond Ukraine. I hope I get a lot of support doing that, because if so, I could continue doing it. We could always get some very interesting information from around the country in the United States and maybe around the globe in the future. But I thank you very much once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question of the night just came in from Level 70. He puts in a donation of $10 and says, what about the Russian forces Transnistria? Are they a threat to Odessa?
The Russian forces in Transnistria are existent, but the thing is that I am thinking about their supply lines, and the problem is that they would have to airlift all the supplies to Transnistria for this force to actually have anything to work off of. And the problem is that Russian supply aircraft would have to fly over Ukrainian territory at some point, and it could get shot down really easy, because we've seen a lot of evidence showing that the standard supply aircraft in the Russian Air Force, which is mostly Antonov 22s and IL-76s, have been getting shot down incredibly frequently. So I do think that it would be very hard for those troops to be any sort of risk to Odessa, because they would run out of supplies once they started leaving the kind of like territory of Transnistria. So I don't think they'll actually be a threat in any way, just due to the supply line concerns that could be facing them. So I thank you very much once again for the support, and I hope I answered that question very well, and we're going to move on to the next question.
All right, I just want to quickly recognize 2 donations without comments. We have one from Rashawn HD, and we also have one from Yvette for $10. Thank you very much for the support. We do appreciate it very much. Our next question of the night is from David Huss. He says, what are your thoughts on the idea which France alongside Turkey and Greece to evacuate the Ukrainian city of Mariupol?
That would be very tough, because first, the area around Crimea, because we did look at the territorial waters last night for there, the Russians claim control over the territorial waters around Crimea. This also includes the Kerch Strait. And so for these ships to pass down into the Sea of Azov to get to Mariupol, they would have to pass through Russian territorial waters, that the Russians claim is theirs, and that could lead to some kind of confrontation, or that could escalate into war. So I don't really think it'd be a viable solution, but it is a good idea, and of course the worst they can do is try and fail. And so I would support the idea of a coalition of ships, from Turkey, Greece, and France, trying to get to Mariupol and relieve the city and maybe evacuate some of the citizens. Maybe they can try and reach some agreement with the Russians where it'd be humanitarian ships only and they'd be allowed safe passage to the city. But once again, there's a lot of factors at play there, and I'm sure there would have to be a lot of negotiations in between those 3 governments and the Russian government to make something like that happen. But maybe the Russians would stop being, animals in the way they're fighting this war for a minute, and listen to reason in a way, and allow some kind of humanitarian operation to be conducted to relieve the poor embattled citizens of the city. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that answers your question in some ways. And so we're going to move on to the next one.
And the next question of the night is from Ski XD. He says, what do you think of Georgian Legion in Ukraine?
I think that the Georgian Legion, we haven't heard much about them, but we saw a few videos over the past few weeks of them in action, and it appears that they're doing an incredibly good job. And Georgia also has a very hostile history with Russia, and so they're kind of, much like the Chechens, taking their anger that they want to vent out on the Russians to an area they can, which is Ukraine. And from what we can tell, they're being used to good effect, although we haven't gotten a lot of information to show that they're incredibly active. Whenever we do see videos of them, it's been nothing but success. We haven't seen anything yet of the Russians wiping them out or capturing any of the Georgian volunteers. And so we'll have to see as the days go by if that still remains the case. But as of right now, I highly support what the Georgian Volunteer Legion has done and what they stand for, which is anti-Russian interests. And so I back them 100%. I think they're very good people, and I think what they're fighting for is a good cause. And so I thank you very much for the question. Hope I answered it pretty well. And we're going to move on to the next one.
And the next question is from Jelly Fists, who says, suggestion, you should reach out to Artur Rihai I believe is how it's said, for a collaboration. He is an Estonian reserve soldier. He could provide a unique perspective on the conflict.
Well, that's an interesting suggestion. Once again, we get a lot of suggestions for people we should reach out to as guest speakers. And I know that no one liked the one last night, including me. I didn't like it. I didn't like him at all, and his opinions were pretty wild. And not to get into the in-depth drama, but yeah, that was not good. We're trying to look into maybe getting another guest speaker, but I'm going to run another poll on it so that way I make sure I haven't sullied everyone to the idea of ever having a guest speaker on again, because honestly, in my opinion, it's treading on dangerous waters to bring on anyone, considering how the first one went. But I thank you very much for the suggestion and the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And the final super chat of the night is from William Ballman. He puts in a donation of $5. And William, we appreciate it very, very much. All the donations help us run this channel and keep the channel running well. So with that being said, that wraps up our super chats, and I am ready to start covering our other questions when you're ready, Enforcer.
All right, so what do we got?
All right, so let me get up to the screen here. We have a question from KMC. It's a very simple and straightforward question. He says, Enforcer, are you properly hydrated and rested tonight?
I am properly hydrated. Of course, I always drink a coffee before stream, and we are thinking about getting out some kind of merchandise like coffee mugs, because a lot of people have been asking for it. So I'll make sure that everyone can get hydrated in style along with me. So yes, I am hydrated and I'm ready for tonight. So I thank you very much for the question, and we're going to move on to the next one.
And the next question is from JMax77. He says, there are no NATO or U.S. aircraft on Flight Radar 24. Usually there are a couple of tankers and AWACS around. However, not now. Any opinions on this?
I believe that at this point, of course they're probably active. It's just that they maybe have turned off their transponders, which publicly broadcast their location. So, I mean, that's entirely an assumption as well, so take that with a grain of salt. But if the West is starting to look at this as a serious matter, they're not going to want their aircraft to be highly publicized and their actions heavily scrutinized on public forums, pretty much. So I think that may be the reason why you're not seeing a lot of them, because we do know that there is a large effort of kind of like a quiet mobilization in Britain and the United States, suggesting that they are moving troops towards Poland. So I would highly doubt that there aren't any aircraft airborne at the moment. So I thank you once again for the question. It's a pretty good one, and we're going to move on to the next one.
And real quickly, back to one super chat that just came in from Curtis Horn for a donation of $5. He said he wants to suggest YouTuber Task and Purpose for a guest if you were to do that again.
I think we may look into doing that again, maybe, but we'll have to try and eyeball someone, and it will be something that probably happens way down the line, because we'll vet them very carefully, even if they are a popular YouTuber, because I'm not wanting something to happen again like we had last night. But I thank you very much for the suggestion. We've been getting that one a lot. Task and Purpose has been something that a lot of people have wanted. And so thank you very much once again for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question of the night is from GLL, a longtime channel supporter. He asked the question, can Ukraine get a white peace just by holding where they are? Or must they retake territory that has been captured by the Russians?
I think that they could get a white peace holding the territory they hold right now, but they'd have to hold it for quite some time, maybe another month. And the question is, will the Ukrainians have that kind of patience to just sit still for a month? Or could they spend their time a little bit better and just start pushing the Russians back now and be in a much better position in a shorter amount of time? I think that would be an interesting way, in my opinion, to look at it. But then again, that's just my position on this. It may be more advantageous for them to not eat up resources just in case if things came to worse, and to just try and hold the ground they have right now. But that's a pretty good question. I thank you so much for being a return supporter. Apparently, a lot of people haven't been able to chat in the comments or do super chats, and what I'm thinking may have happened is that the mods we had, in their attempt to try and sabotage and lie about the channel as much as possible, hid users from the channel. So that's why I'm thinking may have happened, but I thank you very much for the support. We're going to look into that after the stream, and so we're going to move on to the next question.
And real quickly, one of our regulars, Takata Store, has snuck in a super chat real quick. He says, try again, my man. One error can't matter that much.
Well, I thank you very much for the support. And no, it can't matter too much. And anyways, this train's going to keep rolling regardless of what happens. So thank you very much for the support once again. And thank you very much for being a return viewer to the channel. It means a lot to me that a lot of people like this enough to always come back. So I thank you once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And our next question is from Jason Baker. He says, Enforcer, if the war expands beyond the borders of Ukraine, as I expect you will imply shortly, is Georgia or Moldova next for a full invasion? And what about Finland or Uzbekistan? Thank you.
Moldova doesn't have any connections to the Russian border, and one thing that they cannot do is operate outside of Russia in a way. I mean, like, they could back rebels in Moldova for sure. You know, that's kind of why Transnistria exists. But I don't think they'd actually be able to do anything there right now. I've kind of covered that in a super chat previously. But Georgia has remained neutral for the large part. Turkey is a NATO member. Russia is, of course, you know, the antagonist of this entire page in history right now. But I don't think Georgia would be invaded because they're just kind of sitting there not really siding with anyone, and they're remaining neutral for the large part. So I don't think they would become the next battleground. I believe that the next battleground would be the Baltic states if a war was to break out, because it just seems like that's the largest amount of front line that Russia shares with the West. And it also seems like a very dangerous spot for NATO to keep hold of, because they're so close to the second largest city in Russia, which is St. Petersburg, only about 73 miles away. So that's kind of my opinion on it. But then again, take that with a grain of salt. I was right for the most part with how the Russians conducted their offensives in the opening parts of this war. But as the war goes on, things become unpredictable. And so take everything I say like in that regard with a grain of salt. But I thank you for the question. It's a pretty good one. And so we're going to move on to a few more, and then we're going to cut off the questions at 11:10.
Okay, and just real quickly, Geoff just threw in a donation of $5. Geoff, we appreciate the support very much. And just so everybody knows, you do not have to donate on this channel to have your question answered. For example, the question I just read from Geoff was one that he actually sent in without a super chat. But we certainly appreciate the support very much, and all donations just help us keep running the channel the way we're running it. So once again, thank you all for the support. The next one up for the night is, real quickly, one more super chat that just came in from Kevin Dixon. He says, where's the 40-mile long convoy?
Oh, man. Oh, I can't wait to tell you this news, man, because apparently it's been a while since you heard the news, which is fine. Not a lot of people have enough time to keep up to date. But that thing fell apart. They sent the rearward 17 miles of it back into Belarus, and then it disappeared. So we don't know if it was sent elsewhere around Ukraine or not. It just left Ukraine, and we haven't heard about it since. And then the forward part of the convoy, the first 20 miles of it, is still sitting there in the woods, as far as we know, in the tree lines around the highway, and still has not moved. It's been like 2 weeks, and they've gotten nothing out of that thing. It's hilarious, really, that the Russians did so poorly with that idea. And everyone was saying, they're going, oh, wait a minute. You know, the Russians, they have everything put together. They're just sitting there and they're thinking. No, they weren't. I mean, like, if they wanted to think, they would have lined that convoy up in Belarusian territory where it would have been safer, thought something out, and then they would have moved them in, instead of sitting in this vulnerable 40-mile-long convoy that was eating up resources every day, where people had to, where the Air Force had to protect it, and just have it sit there. That wouldn't make much sense, and it didn't, because that's not what happened. They just ran out of supplies and got stuck there. And then the remaining 17 miles of it finally made it out, and the beginning 20 miles of it are still staked out, hiding in the woods. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that answers your question in a way, because it's funny what happened to the fate of the 40-mile-long convoy. So I thank you once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
Okay, and the next question, once again, is another super chat that just came in from Boss Fan. He puts in a donation of $10 and says, this $10 is to say, sorry you got trolled last night. We know you try your best.
Well, I thank you very much for thinking that I'm well-intentioned. I try to be as best I can, and I didn't think that the guest would come on and say the things he said. I didn't like the direction it was going in. I thought he would add something to the channel, but instead he took away a good bit. But I thank you very much for the support once again, and I'm glad that a lot of people were able to look beyond that and know that I really have no control over the guests once they get on the show. And so I thank you very much once again. And so we're going to move on to 2 more questions, and then we're going to call it a night.
Okay, and just quickly, I want to recognize a donation from Robert Massey III again. He puts in another $5. He says, thank you, dude. We appreciate you. And thank you very much, Robert. We appreciate you as well for the donation. And with that being said, we are going to move on to one of our other questions. And just real quickly, I'm trying to make sure that we are picking the best ones that we have here since we only have about 2 left. Let's see. So I'm going to go ahead and ask a question from Zeta Lane once again. They say, do the Ukrainians pursue retreating Russians, trying to cause more damage or casualties?
I think that they may. That's usually how modern warfare is conducted in a way, is that when the enemy force is retreating, you just keep chasing them down so that way they never get time to regroup. So that may be the case, and that may be why the Ukrainians make such quick ground in the places they are, is because they're not allowing the Russian forces to regroup, and they're just chasing them for miles and making sure that they don't have the chance to set up a defensive position and then hold that. So I believe that that may be the case. But if you're saying that they're like shooting them in the back and stuff, they may be doing that as well. I mean, it's, in the modern world, there's no such thing as not shooting someone in the back. There's no such thing as that being a disrespectful thing to do. That's been happening in war for centuries. And so if force is retreating, you usually just still shoot at them even when they're turned around and running away. But I thank you very much for the question. It's a pretty good one. And so we're going to move on to the last question of the night.
Okay, and real quickly, I just want to recognize a donation from Diffuse56 with a $5 donation. Thank you very much for the support. We appreciate you very, very much. Our next question and last question of the night is going to be from Who's Orphic, who says, NATO will have to do some action one day or another, so they know they will have to go to war. So why are they waiting for the worst to happen first? What is your opinion on the matter?
Well, the thing is that an alliance or a country that takes the first action, like some kind of preemptive action, like we've seen Russia do invading Ukraine, it doesn't really look good. And so the West usually, well, really, it's not really the West. It's democratic countries that are truly democracies. Usually wait until something happens to them and then they react. So, that way they're not going into a war that may be unpopular with the public. So, kind of like how 9/11 happened. 9/11 happened, and then we went over and tried to take care of Osama bin Laden and the Taliban in Afghanistan, and also Al Qaeda, because they have like a million terrorist organizations. It's hard to remember the names, but we had to wait for something to happen. And in World War I and World War II, we had to wait for some kind of cataclysmic events to draw us into the war. In World War I, it was Lusitania and the Zimmerman telegram. In World War II, it was Pearl Harbor. In Vietnam, it was the Gulf of Tonkin incident. In Korea, there was really nothing that got us into Korea. But you can see that the main thing that leads the U.S. and the West is, in general, to get involved in a war is some action happening against them first, instead of trying to do some kind of preemptive war, in a way. So, with that being said, we've answered the last question of the night. I thank you all so much for watching. We will be coming on at 10 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. Tomorrow will be the fundraiser day, so make sure to come here and give it all you got, so that way we can raise a decent amount, well, a lot of money for a good charitable organization that's going to be helping out inside of Ukraine. I'd also like to point out, because it appears that a group of people tried to spread mistruths. Well, it was the mods that went out were trying to spread mistruths, apparently, because I've been asked a lot, where does that money go? And the way that YouTube fundraisers work is that I set that thing up, and then YouTube manages all of it. So when you donate to the fundraiser, I don't get $1 of that. I don't even get to look at it. It just passes through the live chat and into a YouTube account. They manage all the fees, and then they send the money wherever it needs to go after the fundraiser's over. So that's how that works. I'm wanting to clear that up so that way people aren't scared to donate and our fundraiser won't do well. Because I love the fundraiser, and I think that's one of the only things we actually do that makes a huge difference here in my heart and what I think. So I thank you all once again for watching. I hope you have learned a lot of information tonight, as well as me. I've actually seen a decent bit and heard a lot from y'all that I didn't know going into tonight. So I thank you all once again, and I hope y'all have a great night. Take care, everyone.